So this was my original tier list at the beginning of Season 11 before they buffed every single tank for that mid-Season 11 patch and even had a hotfix patch right afterwards. This will likely be the patch we play on for the next 30 days until Season 12 and Juno's release on August 20th, so this new tier list should tie you over for the rest of the summer. As I've gotten older, I'm 31 now, I've been subscribing to products and services here and there over the years, and I recently found out that I've been paying for an additional product, Adobe After Effects, which was bundled in with Photoshop and Lightroom. I do use both of those frequently for social media and content creation, you know, thumbnails, Instagram pictures and whatnot, but After Effects, I realized I hadn't used it in like 2 years, and I forgot I was paying for it. And that's where today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. You see, Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. I like how it visually compiles everything you're paying for in front of you, because it can really help you take a step back and go like, huh, all those things really do add up. So tap, tap, tap a few buttons here and you can remove some subscriptions there and work on better spending habits moving forward. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the features with over 500 million in canceled subscriptions. Go to rocketmoney.com/CarQ or click the link in the description to start for free with more features if you go premium. That's rocketmoney.com/CarQ to get started for free. Let's begin with all the tanks who have been buffed in some capacity thanks to that Titan tank mid-season patch. D.Va, the first one on the list, benefited significantly with the defense matrix going up by 0.5 seconds, and that amounts to about a 15% increase in uptime, with the same regeneration time, which is kind of like a double-dipped buff. And then you couple this with the huge buff to micro missiles damage, which is a 22% relative damage increase. That increases your kill potential, and you have yourself what I feel like is the best tank on this patch. Extremely versatile, mobile, and she has the other added benefit of having over half of her HP as armor. And guess what? Armor was also buffed in this mid-season patch, making D.Va an absolute nightmare for like soldier players and sojourn players. So, S tier for me. Definitely at the top. DOOMFIST is okay-ish. His tank buff relative to the others was on the weaker side, you know, just a 5 extra overhealth multiplied by each target he hits, so it probably gives him like an extra 20 to 40 HP or more on an average ability rotation, but that's about it. And then you compare it to the other tanks who got buffs and they benefited from the armor buffs, and guess what? Doom has no armor, right? So I still think Cassidy as well is quite good despite his range nerf, and that range nerf doesn't really matter against Doom because Doom has to get in close to be effective, and if Cass is always like available as a backup pick for enemy DPS heroes, it can be a little rough to play into. We'll get into Ana later, but I also think Ana is one of the best supports this patch based on how the meta has played out, and Ana has always been a big threat for DOOMFIST to kind of shut him down with the antis and the sleeps, so I think this, you know, okay-ish B- tier makes sense to me. You just gotta have to play Doom in the right situations and be effective, unless you're just a top Doom one trick. Okay, I think the JUNKRAT buffs on the mid-season patch are actually better than DOOMFIST's. For example, there's like 25 instant extra overhealth on Shout. Obviously, you don't have it on rotation like Doom by hitting people, but 25 extra overhealth is nice, and each bleed goes from what, 2 times to 2.5 times. That is a 25% increase on each individual bleed. And remember, Queen instantly heals the remaining wound damage if that target dies. So the improved multiplier, can compound like crazy. So I think Queen's kind of in the middle. She's like pretty solid. Has some counterplay. Like I said, Ana's really good right now, which can kind of slow Queen down with a good anti-nade, but I think she's a little bit better than Doom. B tier. Okay, MAUGA. I think at the higher levels, MAUGA fell off hard. He used to be, what, A tier? I think he's down to as low as C tier right now. They completely shifted the way he kind of plays. They shifted the uptime of Cardiac Overdrive and reduced it from 5 seconds to 3 seconds. But they buffed the raw power of it. Now, if you're fighting MAUGA like a headless chicken and aren't reading cooldowns, then yeah, of course he can do some extreme stuff like the whole engagement bait viral videos you see on social media, making people think they actually buffed this hero. But in a real match with real players, it's a net nerf, 100%, and I'll die on this hill. 3 seconds uptime on MAUGA means your entire D.Va matrix eats it out. You can even Rein Shield the whole thing. You can Sigma cycle it. The list goes on. So yeah, I've barely seen MAUGA at all since this mid-season patch, and I think he should stay that way, right? In the niche and C tier. He can still pop off if played properly with coordination, but honestly, even that team buff aspect is technically nerfed, I think, with the way Cardiac works now with the teammates, but in any case, C tier is comfortable for me. Now, ORISA as well. She literally got half a second on Fortify. Yay. That's it. E-whoop. Relative to the other tank buffs, that's kind of like a nothing burger. It does help her cycling a little bit, but armor as well. Let's talk about armor. Armor has been buffed again to 10 damage reduction per shot, so anything under 20 gets halved. And that means heroes who had their weapons that fell between the 10 to 20 bullet got nerfed really hard. That's kind of why Soldier sucks, why SOJOURN primary sucks. And guess what? Orisa's fusion driver is a 13 damage weapon, which means she's like 18% weaker when shooting armor and 23% weaker when headshotting relative to the early season 11 patch. We have the math out here in the graphs, okay? And yeah, that's not good for her offensive capability. Now the silver lining is she does have a lot of base armor herself, so she's a bit more durable in that capacity. But I'm honestly not convinced she's that good, and arguably the toughest tank to play at this time in the D tier. RAMATTRA. I think RAMATTRA in the early mid-season 11 patch was the other S tier hero because of that 75 armor, which was for both forms, by the way, and that DPS increase to pummel to put some heroes in the kill threshold. Very, very good, very, very strong, and so strong that they actually had to hotfix him like 3 days later. So his power level has been tuned back a little bit to a more reasonable level, but I would say still at like A tier. Very strong brawl tank, one of the best stalls in the game with the block and all that extra armor and that sweet armor buff. Great, fantastic pick. Now REINHART. Rein's shield is back at 1600 HP, it regens faster, and it's actually really hard to break unless like the Rein player makes a big mistake or if the other team is playing a Bastion. The charge buff does help against a few matchups like the Mei and Reaper who would normally cause problems for Rein, so that's solid, and his charge will do more, I guess, average base damage if he pins another tank. So overall, I'd actually argue he's above average right now in the B+ tier. You know, he's got a lot of base armor too. Did I mention that already? Probably. A lot of shield. Hammer swings aren't affected too hard by the armor changes. Still stronger than the old armor, and is definitely another great brawl option as well. All right, for ROADHOG, to me, this Pigpen buff here is such a whatever buff to the ability, and that whole thing requires a setup to generate value when compared to other tanks who just have like innate armor and like just pure number buffs for durability and damage. So for that reason, I think Hog has fallen quite a bit, arguably down to the C or even like the tough D tier. I'll probably keep him at like C tier because this tier list is for, you know, your average player, and Hog can still punish positional mistakes, which are happening all the time. Punish a bit harder than some other heroes, so there's that. For Sigma, I mean, Sigma's still just a beast of a hero, extremely safe, sturdy. The buff for the mid-season was a 40 more damage on the rock, which is actually better than you think because the previous direct rock into double hyperspheres melee used to only do 230 damage, but now it's at 270 damage, which is in kill range for all 250 HP heroes. So that increased lethality at close range helps bridge the gap with one of his weaknesses, which is all these people getting in his face, and it kind of keeps this hero in the A tier for me. Great tank. Winston moves up to A tier this patch. The armor buffs actually mean nothing for him. It's good because on the offensive, his weapon ignores it, and defensively, a little sliver of armor helps him along with his increased primal durability. The biggest is like his neutral game right now because his poke before he engages is really nice because that charge up time buff, fantastic, and really chip people down a little bit to farm a few extra percentages of his ult to get primal a little quicker, and primal a little bit stronger, more durable now, and it does apply some decent pressure. He's an amazing tank, pairs really well with Ana, who's obviously, in my opinion, moved up to S tier, but I'll get into her later. I still think D.Va is just a slight cut above for solo queue purposes, but I think like in pro play, he's definitely like one of the S tier meta tanks, but we'll keep him in A tier here. All right, Wrecking Ball. The more I see him, the more I'm convinced this hero is a sleeper pick, right? The ball connoisseurs can take this hero to the top, but even a mediocre ball is just straight up living and booping this patch. He has so much HP to go through. He's got some good base armor. You can disengage with a DPS passive to wear off. You can give your teammates better adaptive shields this patch. You reload faster. The list goes on. I think he's like low-key an A tier tank. B+ for your average ball player, but like honestly A or S tier if you're really good at him. But we'll keep him here on average because I don't think a lot of people have mastered this hero and can't just randomly pick him up and just pop off. Okay, Zarya. I actually think she was really good early in the mid-season patch, but then that hotfix patch, like I mentioned, 3 days later, sort of put her power level back down to where it was in the pre-mid-season 11 patch. And when compared to how every other tank's power level went up, the net changes to her are kind of on the underside of mid, in my opinion. I think having an extra second for each individual bubble cooldown hurts the uptime, and I think for tanks, uptime is one of the most important traits, similar to how MAUGA is. uptime for Cardiac kind of hurt him a lot, even though the raw power when it's up is better. Like Zarya's bubble is a little thicker at like what, 225 HP. It does last a little longer, but I think the uptime is the biggest thing. She's okay-ish for me, like on the underside of B, and I think I'm fine with where this tier list kind of looks for this patch here for the tanks. All right, Ashe is probably your best generalist hit scan option this patch for the same reasons I gave her in the last tier list, right? Number one, SOJOURN was nerfed at the beginning of Season 11, and Cassidy's range was nerfed this mid-season patch, making him a bit more situational for the close range maps, and thus that opens up a slot and more opportunities to play Ashe. Number two, it's another option to help slow down the PHARAHs and the Echoes if they are running one. Number three, Dynamite. Still strong, even after the second round of buffs to armor, because it does pretty much deal the full damage at 140 instead of 150. Remember, it just removes -10 on the pop, the initial detonation, and not the initial tick, 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 tick. That's all doing full damage. Number four, Dynamite applies a DPS passive for 7 seconds. And number five, Bob also applies a DPS passive, and he randomly got the tank passive buff this patch, where he's harder to boop and headshot now. Didn't think he needed it, but that's what they decided to do. In any case, A tier for me. I think Bastion is still C tier. You can stomp a Winston, of course, but with all the divas running around with the longer matrix, it's a little tough. Plus, Bastion's recon form is actually worse now against armored targets, according to the math. So yeah, while you wait for your actual strong form and you have to sit there and recon, it's not gonna be very good. You're a little tankier because you also have a little armor, but it's the same story every season. Just play him in the right comp and you'll be okay. Now, Cassidy, he did receive some pretty hefty range nerfs with the adjustment to his fall-off range, which sort of nudges him back to a more situational strong, where he's still very good up close, but not so much as a general hit scan that he was last patch, where you can play him on any map at any time. Still, I'd probably put him at like B+. Still good. All right, Echo, I think, is the top tier damage hero, even though her usage rate isn't very high. Now, PHARAH was dominant as the flyer last patch, and even back then, Echo was actually a good pick to help answer and contest the PHARAHs, but now that PHARAH's HP has been nerfed, it makes doing that job even easier and the clear winner of the skies. Now, Cassidy's hit scan range was nerfed this patch, right? And he can't press you as easily, and Echo can avoid most tanks apart from Diva. So you kind of just have to pick your battles as needed. I do think for the average player, Echo is one of the harder heroes to pick up, of course. PHARAH is actually much easier since you just sit there and spam. But Echo does require a bit of finesse. You got to set it up, you got to time the beam and everything and the execution correctly. You have to have good hero knowledge to use a duplicate well. But apart from all that, I still think Echo is the best choice if you can play her well in the S tier. Okay, Genji kind of got pushed down to C tier this patch. Yeah, unlike other like flanky opportunist heroes like Tracer or Sombra, they can find, you know, complete backline angles and avoid armored tanks if they want to. You don't have that same luxury as Genji. You know, a lot of Genji's gameplay loop is just sitting there, chucking shurikens out until you find the opportunity to dash in and punish mistakes. But that neutral shuriken poke portion of his gameplay loop got shafted really hard this patch, right? The armor buffs target the low, 10, 20, 30 damage ranges very hard, and according to the math here, it's not looking very good for our cyborg ninja. Less damage on the shurikens means less blade frequency too, and in addition, tanks are just generally more lethal now. And you have to be very careful when you go for blades. Like, if the Zarya turns around and bubbles someone, they last longer, and there's more HP on it. That's not good. And then the Sigma Rock is more lethal, too. I played some games today where my Genji just got rocked every time by the Sigma. It wasn't very fun. And to top it off, the enemy ZENYATTA has a faster Transcendence buildup thanks to his small buffs this patch, which can counter you as Genji if you, dry blade with no nano. And yeah, it is what it is. HANZO, still C tier for me. He's just a worse hit scan. Like, why play an inconsistent projectile hero when you can just play a reliable hit scan? His alternative playstyle, instead of going for those one shots in the backline, is that tank busting storm arrow spam idea, which is actually harder to do this patch since all the tanks got tankier, and you couple that with Diva being the dominant one. Yeah, good luck bursting her down with all that matrix and armor. Plus she can chase you around too. Not looking good for the Shamadas. JUNKRAT, also C tier. Why? Diva. Try playing Junk against that. Good luck. And there's also Echo. Like, what can Junk do to contest that? Pretty hard to play. Honestly, I think I'm going to put Junkrat in tough. to be honest with you. Mei. I think Mei gets bumped up to B+ on this patch for me. I think a hero like Mei who can complement brawl tanks and screw other brawl tanks makes her a pretty damn good choice, since, you know, the tanks are the kaijus this patch running around, and either enabling your kaiju tank or cutting off the opposing kaiju's resources with a good wall is key. PHARAH was the main topic of my last 2 tier lists. And again, if we reiterate and look back a month ago, PHARAH did have that 58% publicly confirmed win rate at the beginning of Season 11 across all ranks, which is insane. And finally, this mid-season patch, they nerfed her, but not her damage or her knockback. No. Only her HP was cut. That was the big nerf. Now, initially, I was also like, man, that's nothing at all, right? The spam is still there. She's still very annoying. The knockback on the concussive is arguably stronger now in exchange for losing 30 damage on it. But who is using that for direct damage apart from some cheesy combos? But, you know, after playing this patch out, she definitely is noticeably less oppressive, right? 225 HP instead of 250 puts her in that kill range a lot easier for the hit scan heroes, and pressuring the PHARAH means the PHARAH can't peek out as frequently as she used to, which then ties to how often she can spam on certain angles. So that one change in her survivability all kind of compounds and it trickles down a bit. Then you add that D.Va is like the only tank that can contest her. She's played a lot. Improve micro missile damage, lower PHARAH HP, bridges that gap significantly, and the PHARAH can die to the D.Va if she's not being hard pocketed. But all in all, I still think she's, you know, a pretty good DPS hero. She's just no longer S tier meta, in my opinion. All right, my opinion on Reaper hasn't changed since the last patch video, so I'll kind of just read to you what I wrote last time. Reaper in a vacuum is actually quite decent and is very serviceable in the lower ranks thanks to the high HP pool, lifesteal, and free escape tool. At the high end though, I'd argue he's too niche and needs a perfect brawl comp to complement him, because his solo flank style is kind of bad when so many other heroes can do it better than him. And smarter players can kind of sniff out that cheesy playstyle from a mile away. And he also says, "I'm flanking," and he needs to not say that. No voice lines, please, when you flank with him. That'd be a nice buff. Now, in any case, they did buff him in early Season 11, which certainly brings up his power level to offset some of the armor changes. The second round of armor changes didn't affect Reaper, actually, because he was already in that maximum damage reduction threshold. But I'm pretty sure he still stays in the depends on the comp C tier. Okay, Sojourn, I went out on a limb in the early Season 11 tier list saying Sojourn went from high A tier to C tier with her nerfs, and I'm happy to report to you I was right. She's pretty terrible. The trade-off between some of those niche scenarios where you happen to rail multiple people versus just a raw 23% nerf to her rail burst was absolutely detrimental. Now, on this mid-season patch, again, armor got buffed from 5 damage reduction to 10, and that actually nerfed Sojourn's SMG damage, meaning both the SMG and the rail shot now is hot ass. And remember, they nerfed that rail shot and tried to compensate by giving her a better fire rate on SMG, but now this patch, the armor makes her SMG suck even more. So, to me, this puts Sojourn in the D tier. I would just simply pick a different hero at all. Soldier 76. I think he was an average B tier pick last patch, but again, this patch, the armor change hurt him a lot. I have the math here. I got the spreadsheets out, so I'm not just talking out of my ass. So with that, I'm going to slot him in to the C tier. D.Va moving up as the top tank pick, also eats Soldier up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so it's GG's for him, man. So I would only pick Soldier in the, niche, depends on the comp. Like, you can play him if they're not running anything, if they run anything but armor tanks, like maybe a Queen or Zarya, maybe Doom, but Doom kind of can bully Soldier around. Maybe Sig, because he has no armor, but like, you're not just shooting that shield in the suck, good luck against them. So I don't know, I think Soldier C tier. Okay, Sombra, still in the spot where she can be very oppressive, but also meh at the same time. So I'm gonna land her right in the middle at B tier. She's fine. Like I said earlier, really playing into taking down the enemy kaiju tanks is a viable strategy, and Sombra is great into making a tank's life miserable, like switching her against the Ball, the Doom, and maybe hacking the Sigma out of his shield. It's super annoying for them to deal with you, and if not, you can target like isolated, out of position support heroes if they're not playing correctly. With a little more frequency of Zens this patch with this small buff, there's that option. But yeah, probably B tier. SYMMETRA, also fine in the B tier. I think she's a mid-tier hero. Those buffs at the beginning of Season 11 definitely brought her up a lot. And seriously, that beam charge rate is very good. It makes her an absolute menace if you let her build it up and if you leave her unchecked. So as a gentle reminder for the newer Overwatch players who are watching these tier lists, you know, the beam does pass through defense matrix and it's very good against D.Va if the D.Va makes the mistake of playing in your beam range for a little too long. But outside of that, I think SYMMETRA does have to be respected, especially when you play her with Brawl comps. Like, seriously, try playing SYMMETRA again with Ram or Rein with, like, Sim again. It's very, very good. Very fun, too. Torb, also middle of the pack. Maybe B tier? Yeah, B tier. I mean, his turret is a 6th player. It's a free DPS passive applicator as well. You poke with your Cheeto. And also Torb has armor, right? The base armor helps Torb's durability a lot, as he's one of like the few damage heroes that has armor. What is it, just Torb and Bastion? And he's got a big HP pool, so yeah, helps him with the duels. Not much to say here, he's just square in the middle. Now Tracer, still not as dominant as pre-season 11, but one thing to remember is the second round of these armor buffs on this mid-season patch didn't affect Tracer because she was already at that maximum 50% damage reduction threshold. So unlike Soldier or Sojourn, if you've been watching this far along and you heard my explanations earlier, CASSIDY and PHARAH not being picked as much on average also helps Tracer out indirectly. And of course, there's no other hero that can do what Tracer does with her skill ceiling. There's no other damage hero that can take and pressure from the angles that she can and as safely as she can. So it's almost impossible to put her in any tier lower than A at any time for your high average rank player for the foreseeable future, unless other damage heroes and comps are just too overtuned and push her out. But yeah. Okay, Venture, I've kind of knocked down to B tier. I had them at B+ last patch, but I think I was wrong. Like, there's virtually no more MAUGA cardiac synergy anymore since MAUGA's not being played much. You know, if they play Echo and maybe PHARAH, you can't really mark them. So you really have to pick and choose your battles correctly or else you'll just be outranged. That being said, when Venture hits really hard, right? Those close range quarter fights on Flashpoint or Control really bring up Venture's value and pushes her up the tier list. But obviously on some maps where they're very bad, like trying to force them on Junkertown first, or Havana first, excuse me, or any long range map, you're not gonna have a good time. So I think B tier is a safe tier for me. Widowmaker, final one. Man, the last couple of DPS players have all just been B tier. Like, Widow's, if you're just the best player ever, you're gonna find value no matter what. But you can equally shit the bed if you're not careful. So yeah, middle of the pack, B tier for Widowmaker. With all the Kaiju tanks, you can still pick Widow and just snipe everyone else. If you're in a good spot, you just have to be careful if they play any dive tanks or Sombra, and be willing to swap when needed. All right, on to the supports. Ana is so back at S tier. I was eating good this patch because number 1, the armor changes. They don't affect Ana. You do the full damage. Number 2, Ana pairs very well with, you know, D.Va. You can actually nano her pretty consistently with good value. Winston, of course, and honestly, almost all the tanks in rank play work pretty well with nano. It's just, Ana's just a super flexible pick. Number 3, the Brig pairing protection is very good with her because Brig is also naturally tanky with the armor and the peel. Number 4, BAP and Kiriko's offensive damage numbers got hurt a little bit against armor, so their poke isn't as annoying. But the biggest reason is number 5, the power of an enabling ultimate like Nano Boost. Remember, this is a tank patch. Tank Kaiju Titans. Why not make your Kaiju even better by nanoing them on cooldown? Like your Winston, your D.Va, your high energy Zarya, your Queen before she goes in. It's all very, very powerful, and that's what makes Ana the best support this patch, in my opinion. Now, Baptiste, I actually think is still pretty great in the A tier. Now, I mentioned he does do less damage against armor, but the counter argument is that supports that really enable their tanks, like Ana, are beasts this patch. And BAP is, well, a premium choice in your Brawl compositions with reliable, chunky heals. You can save your tanks in a pinch with your lamp, and of course, the window, you shoot that double healing through it, ensure they're alive, plus your own offensive threat with the double damage as well. Brig, I think Brig moves up to B+ this patch because her role is more defined. A lot more Ana's being played. Pairs pretty well with BAP as well. BAP Brig is a legit pairing. Brig offers great peel, defensive health pack pocket, and can slow down all the Winstons and D.Vas running around. I probably wouldn't play her against Brawl, but since there's a lot of Winston and D.Vas and dive, you know, definitely slot her in as needed. ILLARI was actually confirmed to be the top performing support in the early Season 11 patch. In this mid-season patch, they just nerfed her pylon cooldown, which is not really a huge nerf if you have good pylon placements. But the time to actually build your Captive Sun was actually a healthier nerf, but not enough to sway her down too much in my opinion. So I'm gonna leave her in the A tier. An absolute beast in solo queue or ranked play with some of the highest heals per second in a pinch when you pocket someone with that beam, like 115 HPS. Remember her playstyle now with the improved ally pylon from the early mid-season 11 patch with your Kaiju tank is how you're supposed to play her. You kind of just keep it close, beam your tanks, pressure the offensive tank and the enemies, and then take those off angles with your solo pylon when it makes sense, not as a default playstyle. And if you didn't watch the previous tier lists, I've explained how ILLARI ignores the headshot damage reduction that tanks have with their passive with her shots. And then of course, ILLARI doesn't suffer so much from the armor changes because she has high instances of damage compared to other heroes. Okay, KIRIKO, similar to other supports we've gone over, you can't really go wrong with KIRIKO as well, and I'd probably land her in the B+ category. Her kunais are noticeably weaker when just chipping away in the neutral at armor tanks, but obviously she still has all the tools she's always had, the Suzu, Kitsune Rush, free TP. But I've actually found I'm constantly just picking Ana or BAP over her in most scenarios. So it's not like she's bad, she's kind of just outshined a bit. Definitely still good as a generalist support that slots in with most comps and is a good substitute if you are dying a lot on Ana, for example, and you need to play a safer support. Okay, LIFEWEAVER is, well, okay-ish in the B- tier. I think he's a great tank enabler with the hard heal pocketing and the life grip to save your tanks from mistakes. It can be paired quite nicely with the ILLARI to offset that lack of DPS from the support category, and it's kind of like a low-key decent choice this patch, considering how C-tiery, niche, and bad he was for most of his time in this game. Can't go wrong. LUCIO. I think LUCIO is still good. Not meta or great as he used to be, but still good in the B+ category, as he's the only speed hero for now, until Juno is out. But until then, this is all we've got, and as the meta has shifted, his role has been, I guess, a little less optimal, right? There was a point for most of Overwatch 2 where he was so good you'd pick him in like all the dive, all the brawl, and all the poke comps, but now he's kind of just mostly reserved for brawl. And with D.Va and Winston dive being brought up again, players are kind of opting for Ana Brig instead of like Kiri Lucio. Still good though, but another thing that kind of hurt him on this patch was again the armor changes. Those numbers do affect Lucio's green Oreo neutral poke. We have the numbers here, here's the math. Lucio generally does spam these non-stop, and the fact that he's doing less damage on the tanks, who usually do eat a few of these throughout his entire ult cycle, it can definitely add up to a few percentages, right? Which will innately make his ult a little slower to build. So yeah, Mercy, still C tier. She's like the one support where you can't really pocket or enable your tank, because if you fly too close to your tank, that means you're probably going to be punished positionally, and you're better off, you know, playing in the back, enabling an Ashe or an Echo, which is fine, but like other supports that do enable the best heroes in this patch are always going to have an edge, and the best heroes in the patch are tanks. Plus the other supports have playmaking abilities like Kitsune or Nano or Anti-Nade, and that's just something that Mercy simply does not have. That being said, those niche times you're actually able to fly in and res your tank is like the best part of her kit on this patch, right? There's a big difference between resing a 700 HP Reinhardt versus like a 200 HP Widow in the back, right? But those are kind of far in between scenarios, and by nature that just makes Mercy niche in C tier. MOIRA, I would say, is kind of like fine in the B tier. Right down the middle. With a lot of the divas running around, it's actually kind of annoying to throw offensive biotic orbs in the distance to chip away for ult charge, so you're actually better off playing safer, the heal bot version, where you heal orb kind of close to your teammates to build a fast coalescence and use that for your tempo. If you adjust your playstyle a little bit, she's fine as a brawl substitute and is a little safer than some of the other supports thanks to Fade, so she can be subbed in if you struggle with the other ones. And finally, ZENYATTA. I had him at niche last patch, but I'm actually going to move him up to the okay-ish this patch. He received a small buff here where it builds his Transcendence a little faster, but that isn't necessarily what moved him up in my opinion. It's actually mostly the Discord orb on the enemy tank specifically. When the tank titans clash, you know, debuffing the other one temporarily can quickly swing things in your team's favor for space, because they have to, like, you know, wait 7 seconds out of cover to remove the debuff or the Discord orb, which can give your team enough room to capitalize on, or of course if they're in a bad spot with the Discord orb, they just blow up like that, right? That's a kill. That's the best case scenario. But yeah, that's my mid-season 11 tier list. I kept it a bit more brief as we kind of went down the list besides the tanks. There was a lot more focus on explanation for the tanks, but the rest of the explanations are pretty similar to what I said in the early season 11 tier list, and I didn't want to sound too repetitive. But anyways, this is just my opinion. Juno will definitely shake things up next month, but for now, enjoy the rest of your July and early August with this tier list. Peace.